I'm really enjoying my January this year. I am fortunate to live in a climate where winter tends to be pretty delightful. And it's been great to walk the dog the past few weeks and to be outside in general. If you're in the path of those winter storms across the country, I do hope you're safe and cozy in your home. Some other things I've enjoyed so far this January are having all the kids home at the same time. It doesn't happen that often anymore, but the stars aligned at the new year and they were all here along with the dog. I loved the conversations I had in the car driving to places with each one of them and the inside jokes they shared between themselves. And my husband and I could only look at each other and shrug. We had no idea what they were saying. I really loved how much we all laughed and we acted like tourists in our city. It was just a wonderful start to the new year. I've also been enjoying baking this month. I had the perfect excuse to bake a lot with the kids being here. My favorite was the orange cardamom olive oil cake. So delicious with tea. I follow the recipe from the Mediterranean dish, except that I add a bit more cardamom than the recipe calls for. I really love having that cardamom flavor up front. I enjoy having my mom here for a few days. It was her pit stop on her way to Mauritius, and I'm already looking forward to having her here again for a few days on her way back. I'm also enjoying guiding a group through organizing. I just launched the Kitchen Weekend Declutter Sprint. And if you've been listening, you know why I built it the way I did. I've talked about sprint decluttering as a way to end something, right? To make a set of decisions once in a defined window and then be done with them. And while the sprint itself is focused on kitchens, the idea applies anywhere in your home where you're moving through the same space every day, like your mudroom or entryway, as an example. That's a space where you're trying to get out the door with shoes, backpacks, keys, coats, umbrellas, sports gear, all of that needing a storage spot or a staging spot. The decluttering sprint approach works for a lot of working moms because it removes the ongoing low grade decision making that comes from piles that don't quite have homes, hooks that don't quite work, and the things landing wherever there's room. You don't have to keep circling the same decisions week after week. You decide, you finish, and then you get to move through that space without feeling irritated by it every morning. During the launch, I received a message that essentially said, "This feels really fast. Are you suggesting that we declutter like this all the time? That we sprint through our homes every weekend?" Ooh, that's such a smart question. It's thoughtful and curious. And it tells me that this person is actually thinking about how this fits into their life. And the more I thought about that question, the more I realized that it wasn't really about decluttering at all. It was about pace. We're all dealing with pace right now, constantly, right? The world moves quickly, arguably faster than it ever has. We can't deny that there's pressure to keep up, to stay current, to respond faster, decide faster, adapt faster. And at the same time, we're told to slow down and be present, protect your energy, do less. So, how exactly are we supposed to do that? How do we deal with AI? How do we protect our kids, but still instill wise independence in them? How do we steer them towards information, but then teach them to discern what that information means to them without blindly being swayed one way or another? How do we protect our time and our energy in a world that is so fast moving? Should you be on the crest of the wave or behind it? Should you even be on the wave at all? I don't have a universal answer for that. What I do have is beautiful living. And beautiful living is not about defaulting to fast or slow. It's about being choosy. We can choose the pace that feels supportive for us. So when it comes to sprint decluttering, the question isn't whether it's right or wrong, it's whether it fits. Sprint decluttering might be exactly what you need in a time in your life where you're tired of thinking about the same problem over and over again. But that doesn't mean every weekend needs to become a project. It doesn't mean you push yourself just because something worked once. The moment something starts to feel forced, it stops being choosy. And that's really what I want to talk about today. You don't need to move fast, but instead move intentionally and decide when speed actually serves your life. This is episode 95, the difference between keeping up and being organized. Now, that message that I received didn't make me question declutter sprints. It made me think about how often we tend to absorb new expectations without meaning to. Let's say you do something that helps your situation right now, and instead of asking, does this continue to serve me? The question becomes, is this what I'm supposed to do now? Is this how I'm supposed to do this thing from now on? Or we just make it our default to continue that thing that helped us once. And that's the distinction we're exploring today. Keeping up and being organized can look very similar on the surface. Both involve effort, but they're definitely different if you look a little bit deeper. And once you see the difference, you can make decisions about your home, your time, and your energy without turning every helpful tool into a permanent obligation, okay? So let's stay with the entryway because it's a place where this question of keeping up versus being organized shows up a lot. I've noticed after years of working with women in their homes that when an entryway isn't organized in a way that matches how you need to function, it doesn't just look cluttered, it interrupts your flow, right? It's plain old frustrating. You pull out a basket and you hesitate. You shift things around to make space. You adjust, improvise, rehang jackets, restack shoes. None of those moments are huge or anything, but they repeat over and over again, day after day. And repetition is what causes fatigue. That's usually the first clue that you're in keeping up mode, all right? The way that your things are stored in those spaces makes you solve the same small problems over and over. Here's a simple way to notice it. Where do you find yourself redeciding? I don't mean where do you find yourself cleaning again or tidying again, but redeciding. Maybe something never quite has a home, or it technically has a home, but that home doesn't really work and it creates some annoyance. So you keep moving it a bit every time you see it. Where do you keep thinking, why does this thing always end up here? Those are not random annoyances. They're really unresolved decisions. And unresolved decisions are what make a home feel not done, like you're never done organizing. Being organized, though, in the way I'm talking about it today, doesn't mean the entryway stops getting messy. Goodness, no. When you're all coming and going, dropping bags and shoes and coats, you're going to have messes. That's expected, and that's what an entryway is for. But being organized means fewer things are undecided. That's it. Some decisions have been made once intentionally, and then you don't have to make those decisions anymore. That's why sprint decluttering can feel so relieving when it's done well. It's not because you move fast and got it done in 2 days. It's because you finished something. When you clear out the area where your family's shoes and bags land and you decide which items stay and which ones don't, you're not just organizing that space, you're ending a decision. You don't need to mess with that area anymore other than to simply grab what you need and walk out the door. That's the relief. But here's where it's easy to misread what just happened. If you think the relief came from speed, well, then the logical next step is to keep moving fast, right? In other spaces of your house. And that's where pressure sneaks in because now the sprint isn't a tool anymore. You've just made it a standard. And when we misapply standards, we can turn what we do or what we don't do into self-judgment. And that's a really slippery slope to be on. You start scanning your house differently. Instead of enjoying the entryway you just finished decluttering and organizing, you notice the laundry room, then the garage. And you're not noticing those spaces particularly because they're urgent, but because you're still in project mode after a decluttering sprint that created good results. That's keeping up. Keeping up is when your attention keeps getting pulled to the next thing that isn't settled yet. Being organized feels different. Being organized means some parts of your home not just the part that you just organized, but other spaces too, fade into the background, at least for now. They're handled enough that you don't really pay particular attention to them. That's precisely what we want. Now, handled enough doesn't mean perfect, it means predictable. And something that's predictable reduces your mental load, reduces your need to make decisions about it. Most of you listening to this don't need more energy. You need fewer places where you have to spend your valuable energy, or at least where you can be choosy about where you do want to spend your energy. So let's talk about what actually creates that kind of situation. It usually comes down to a few decisions, not these massive overhauls. For example, if every pair of shoes in your mudroom is a different type, a different height, and they're different sizes, but you're trying to fit them all into a shoe rack with the same size openings, you'll be making that decision constantly. Which ones go here? Which ones go elsewhere? Which ones are in the way? So, what should you do? Well, you can change the different types of containers for all the shoes. Your husband's boots are going to need a different size basket than your kids' Crocs. You could look for a shoe rack with adjustable shelves. So, bigger, taller boots can fit well, but there's still space for the smaller shoes too. You're looking for what it will take to make leaving the house easier. If you store bags and backpacks where they look good instead of where the kids can actually grab them on their own, you'll keep relocating things, or you'll have to be the one who hangs the backpacks and takes them down every time. And that gets annoying fast. All of that moving stuff around takes effort. So moving the bag hooks lower is probably not a big project, but it removes the daily annoyance. If mornings require you to have a big dose of wrangling stuff in that mudroom right away before you can even get out the door, you'll feel behind before you really even start your day. Deciding that mornings are intentionally simple is an organizing decision. It's not just a routine or placement decision, it's an energy decision. That's what being organized looks like in practice. It's deciding what doesn't need your full attention anymore. That's the choosy organizer mindset. Being choosy isn't about doing less because you're overwhelmed. It's about deciding what deserves structure and what doesn't. Some areas of your home need clear systems because they touch your life every day. Other areas, though, can be looser, slower, or just left alone for the time being. A beautifully organized life isn't one where everything is optimized. It's one where the most demanding parts of your day are supported, whether that's dinner time, bath time, and bedtime, or the morning, getting everyone out of the house, or even what you're doing at work. Now, I want you to think about your home because a lot of people feel like their homes are slipping into clutter, but it's not necessarily because the systems are bad, but because the decisions aren't shared. One person knows where things go in that mudroom. One person knows the standard. One person resets the space every night before bedtime. So the system technically exists, but it lives in one person's head. And that's just exhausting, isn't it? If you're the only one who makes the decision, you are the system. And systems that rely on one person's vigilance are always going to feel fragile. That's not a character flaw, though. It's a design issue, how the system was designed. Being organized means decisions are externalized. They're visible in the space. They're obvious enough that other people can follow them without asking, even the kids. That's how things start to run on autopilot. Now, autopilot doesn't mean you neglect that thing or that space. It just means the decision has been made clearly enough that it doesn't need daily reinforcement. And that's the part that gets lost when you think of organization as constant effort, as keeping up. So let's come back to the sprint question one more time. Now, with this lens, do you sprint declutter again? Well, maybe. If the area you're looking at makes you or your partner or your family frustrated every day, or if decluttering that one area would noticeably reduce your effort next week, or if the energy you put in now gives you breathing room later, then yes, then a focused sprint can be the compassionate thing to do. But if the motivation is, I should keep this momentum going, then think hard about that. Momentum is useful when it's carrying you towards relief. It's not useful when it turns into pressure. One of the shifts I want for you as a choosy organizer is this. Just because a tool works quickly doesn't mean you should use it constantly. You get to decide when speed serves you and when it doesn't. Sometimes the most organized decision you can make is to stop and decide that a space is good enough for now. You can let it be boring. Yes, you can. You can let it fade into the background for now. That's being choosy. And it's what keeps you out of reaction mode. So if you're wondering whether you're keeping up or actually being organized, here's a simple test. If you stop doing your current routines for a week, what would happen? If everything collapses and you feel like you're starting from scratch, that's vigilance, that's keeping up. But if things get a bit messier, but the basics hold, that's organized. Organized systems bend, keeping up systems break. So we're not deciding between speed versus slowness, we're deciding between being organized versus reacting and keeping up every day. And once you see that clearly, it becomes much easier to choose your next step without turning it into a rule that you have to live by forever. Okay, so here's where we are. The distinction we've been making isn't about how fast you declutter or how much you get done. It's about where your attention and your energy are going. Is it going towards keeping up, which is what it feels like when you're constantly responding, adjusting, and resolving the same small problems in your home? Or is your attention and energy going towards being organized, which feels steadier? Not because nothing ever goes wrong, but because fewer things are undecided in your home. So when something does inevitably go sideways, you don't panic because you know how to get things back in order. When you're organized, some decisions have already been made clearly enough that they stop needing your daily attention. That's why decluttering sprints can feel so relieving. It's intense, yes, but it's also finite. It doesn't mean that speed is now your standard. It simply means that finishing your decluttering in this area helped. So, what should you do? Well, I'd like you to answer this question. Where in my home am I redeciding something over and over again that could be decided once? And I'm not talking about cleaning or like tidying up. I'm talking about redeciding something. Where do you keep adjusting stuff, like where it's placed or how it's placed in the spot where it lives? Where do you keep trying to make room? Where do you keep thinking, why does this thing always end up here? That's usually the place where one thoughtful decision, not necessarily a full decluttering sprint, but where one thoughtful decision to change something could reduce your daily effort. And if you're in a phase of life where your energy is limited, this is a really good thing to think about. Choosing not to do a sprint is also an organizing decision because choosing to let something be good enough isn't giving up, it's just prioritizing. Beautiful living isn't about doing more beautifully. It's about choosing what deserves your care and your attention now, and then letting the rest run quietly enough in the background. So, if the question of how, when, and how fast should I declutter this room or that space comes up for you, I hope this episode helps you to think about that distinction between keeping up and being organized. And that should help you choose what to do now versus what can stay just like it is for the time being, because where you spend your energy and what you give your attention to is important. If you're not following the podcast yet, I'd love it if you would, so you don't miss any new episodes. Have a beautifully organized week. And if you notice yourself slipping into keeping up mode, just ask yourself one simple question. Is this asking me for more effort or for one clear decision? You don't need to keep proving that you're on top of things. You get to choose what gets your energy and what gets to fade into the background. I'm Z, and I'll see you on the next episode.